In a bold escalation, Israel has killed the Houthi Prime Minister Ahmed al-Rahawi and several senior ministers in a precision strike on the capital during a government meeting, shocking the region. The attack, aimed at decapitating Houthi leadership, comes despite a US brokered pause on shipping attacks, but not on strikes against Israel. The Houthis vowing, quote, black days of vengeance, pledging undeterred support for Gaza. Iran condemned the strike as a war crime, while Netanyahu's government, spooked by retaliation fears, has moved meetings to secret locations. This is not just a strike on Sanaa. It's a spark in a tinderbox. Welcome to Think Tank.
Our world is becoming unhinged.
The Guardian has reported that an Israeli strike on Sanaa, Yemen, has reportedly killed the Houthi Prime Minister Ahmed al-Rahawi, along with several other ministers. The strike, which the Houthis claim targeted a government meeting, is a major blow to their leadership. This is considered the most senior Houthi official killed since the Red Sea conflict began. The Israeli Defense Minister, Israel Katz, hailed the strike as a crushing blow and warned that it's only the beginning. This event marks a clear escalation in the conflict, as Israel appears to be shifting from targeting Houthi infrastructure to targeting their top-tier leadership. This is a significant setback for the Houthis, who have been launching attacks on Israel and international shipping in solidarity with Gaza. We must keep a close eye on the region for potential Houthi retaliation, which could further destabilize the already volatile situation. According to Sharq al-Awsat, in a bold escalation, Israel killed Houthi Prime Minister and top ministers in a precision strike on the capital, shattering the group's leadership meeting. The attack, targeting the hidden command center near a water plant, leveled a building and marked the first time senior Houthis were eliminated. Houthis, under intense pressure, are now hiding in rivals' homes across Sanaa, constantly shifting locations to dodge strikes, a sign of desperation. Israel, using real-time intelligence, struck with deadly accuracy, vowing more to come. The Houthis defiant, swear revenge and pledge to keep supporting Gaza. But with their defenses crumbling and regional tensions soaring, this strike may be just the beginning of a dangerous new chapter. Explosions shatter Sanaa's skyline. Israel strikes deep into Yemen, eliminating the Houthi Prime Minister and top officials. This is the untold story of a covert war erupting from the shadows.
In a dramatic escalation of the shadow war linked to Gaza, Israel has struck at the heart of Houthi leadership, killing Prime Minister Ahmed al-Rahawi and several senior ministers in treacherous airstrikes. The Israeli army targeted a government workshop southwest of Sanaa, just hours after intelligence detected a high-level gathering. The event, meant to record a speech by Houthi leader Abdel Malik al-Houthi, became a deadly ambush. Rahawi, though largely symbolic, was a key figurehead of Iran-backed regime. This is not isolated. Since October 2023, the Houthis have launched over 50 drone and missile attacks on Israel, claiming solidarity with Gaza. In May, a U.S. Houthi deal curbed Red Sea shipping attacks, but explicitly excluded strikes on Israel. Israel views the use of cluster munitions in recent Houthi missile as a game changer, triggering a shift from defense to decapitation. The goal? dismantle command structures, and deter Iranian proxies. Yet the Houthis are defiant. President Mahdi al-Mashhad vowed, "Your strikes will not shake a hair on the head of our smallest children." Chief of Staff al-Gamari, reportedly wounded but alive, promised escalation. While Defense Minister al-Atifi and Chief of Staff al-Gamari may have been targeted, their survival or confirmed death remains unclear. What's certain, Israel aims to fracture Houthi cohesion. The repercussions? Regional volatility. Iran gains propaganda leverage, global trade remains at risk, and Israel signals no front will be left unchallenged. But in Yemen's rubble, a warning echoes. Killing leaders may not break a movement forged in resistance. The shadow war widens.
To talk to us more about the most recent updates concerning the possible repercussions of Israel's attacks on Yemen, we're joined from Cairo by Dr. Khaled Dawood, the managing editor of Al-Ahram Weekly, and Abdullah Smaid, a journalist and political researcher. Thank you both for joining me here on Think Tank. Firstly, let's start off with you, Dr. Dawood. Does Israel's assassination of the Houthi Prime Minister mark a shift or a dangerous shift from the strategic hedging to assassinations in a more regional and more aggressive war?
Well, thanks, Reham, for having me. Of course, this latest strike marks an unprecedented escalation since the clashes started between Israel and the Houthis in Yemen over the past 2 years, because Yemen was always thought to be a front that's far from Israel. The Israelis did not really have an active spy network inside Yemen, like they have, say, for example, in Lebanon or in Syria or even in Iran, as we have seen during the recent war. So the assumption was that little was known about the leadership of the Houthis, or even more important for the Israelis and the Americans at one point, of course, are the hideouts of the missiles which the Houthis used to fire at Israel over the past 2 years. So I guess it's a very important warning message to the Houthi leadership that the Israelis, after this long time of conducting military strikes, at length even targeting very important targets such as the airport or the main ports, now this time they've developed even further, and they managed to get resources on the ground within Sanaa itself to inform them about the meetings and the whereabouts of important leading figure within the Yemeni leadership. Of course, some people would argue that targeting a meeting for the Yemeni cabinet is not really the most difficult thing to do, considering that the real decision makers within the Houthi group are not necessarily including the prime minister or the ministers that have been targeted in this attack, but maybe people like Abdul Malik al-Houthi or some military commanders. And as you mentioned in your own report, it remains unknown so far whether, for example, the Minister of Defense or the Army's Chief of Staff who might be involved, who are actually involved in the military planning, were among those killed in the cabinet meeting. But if the matter is, limited to the assassination of the Prime Minister, Minister of Foreign Affairs, Minister of Agriculture and Education, I mean, again, those are not the ones who order the firing of the missiles.
Mainly.
Excuse me?
They're civilian targets mainly, they're not military command. Exactly.
They are not Abdul Malik al-Houthi, the leader of the group, who just made a very defiant speech less than an hour ago, confirming that nothing will deter them from continuing to fire missiles at Israeli targets in support of the Palestinians in Gaza. And again, let's not forget that it's not only the Israelis that have been striking very hard targets within Yemen. Also, U.S. President Donald Trump had his own ground in trying to, eliminate the danger that the Houthis represent to U.S. and Israeli interests. But after 1 month of war, of fighting and bombing within Yemen itself, he discovered, or President Trump discovered, that this is going to be a long fight, that the Houthis have some capabilities that they did not expect. Several important and expensive U.S. drones were downed during that month of American bombing of Yemeni targets. But again, that assassination of political figures within the Yemeni leadership is again probably a start, as the Israeli Prime Minister stated in a recent speech, that this is only the beginning of more targets to be aimed at among the Yemeni leadership. So it remains to be seen. However, so far, the situation remains the same. The Yemeni leadership, the Houthi leadership in particular, remains steadfast in their support for Gaza. They say that nothing is going to change their course. And at the same time, the Israelis definitely managed to deal a very heavy blow to the Yemeni side in front of their own public opinion.
Okay, let's get Mr. Ismail's perspective here now. How does the Houthi tactic of hiding in rival homes reflect, does this reflect a collapsing sense of security within, the upper class of Houthis, I suppose, or even within the stronghold of the capital, Sanaa? Does this signal that they're all fearful? Top command?
Greetings to you and to your kind viewers. Certainly, we should understand the Houthis group as terrorist groups based on terrorist doctrines and practicing several crimes against the Houthis. Never felt that there is a great acceptance with that. And among the communities and the places that they are saying that are only just 20% of the Yemeni territories. And even the speech of the Houthis leader never directed a great threat for the Israelis or within Yemen in their stronghold by threatening that to fortify the internal front. And they had a feeling what happened is a great and strong blow for the Houthis group, considering such a government was reformed after a long research and searching for civil or civilian faces that could be presented before the world and domestically, and is trying to play on the issues, bringing southern personalities as he did not control any southern governance. Therefore, he lost politically and within the issue of security, and as it seems the greater penetration of the Houthis group, as they said that we have no support with their communities. So today, what is being practiced by the Houthis is trying to support in Gaza, never affected the war in Gaza. This group is just trying to keep itself and to jump over the very doctrine issues, and it is just a resonate of such Iranian orientation and directions, and therefore we are before a great scene that we open the matters to different stages. There were Israeli American targets against the Houthis, but never reached the commanders, and today, as reportedly as a Minister of Interior within a very prominent figure, might be killed along with the Minister of Defense, according to the report, as well as the Chief of Staff, within a very pivotal figure to what is called within the Houthis.
I apologize for cutting you off there, but does this actually mean that the Houthi top command are fearful of what comes next when it comes to basically what the Israelis may do to them?
I think the matter is very much related to the Houthis group, as it is that we can name it as different militias that entered in the Israeli communities. That it should point it out that the Houthis aren't from the Yemen. It's very repelled militias as kidnapping, the decisions of war and peace that would lead the Yemenis to destroy their assets. The Yemenis are the very much harmful people, as the Sanaa port is fully disrupted and suspended, and would lead those who wish to travel away from Sanaa to choose different directions. And this resistant Israel might find through their strikes to penetrate them individually or through a very sophisticated technology. And it seems what happened in the last Thursday in a very great penetration, particularly the Houthis group isn't a political group that has the Iranian expertise that aren't on the level of dealing with Israeli penetration, and we may call it that some layers of security and strategic occupations, along with the intel, that the Houthis are falling in. And I think in the coming days there will be an indication of more escalation.
Okay, let's talk to Dr. Dawood again. Is the US Houthi shipping truce now collapsing with the attacks that Israel had, conducted against Yemen? I'm sure this was green-lighted by the US.
Well, let me point out first of all that in response to the previous question about how Israel managed to target the top Yemeni leadership. The strangest thing actually is that the Yemenis continued or the Houthis continued to conduct such meetings while knowing, since even the American strikes have started, that their top leadership is among the targets that the Americans and the Israelis are going to try to get in their war against Yemen. So it's actually in danger, and that they are being probably surveilled, and there are serious attempts to get their top leadership at this time of continued exchange of missiles between Yemen and Israel. But at the same time, there is no question that this Israeli campaign is being carried out with the U.S. blessing, with the blessing of U.S. President Donald Trump, even after Trump himself, as I said, had his own try in trying to defeat the Houthis or forcing them to stop firing missiles at ships at the Suez Canal or other areas in nearby countries. But at the same time, there is no question that the U.S. blesses this kind of Israeli continued attacks, but without necessarily jeopardizing their own agreement with the Houthis to stop targeting U.S. ships in Suez or U.S. troops in nearby countries. And there are no indications so far that the U.S. Plans to join the fight directly again. And probably they are happy with what the Israelis are doing. And this boost they had by hitting the top leadership of the Houthis is definitely good news for the American side.
But do you think that there won't be any there won't be any blowback towards the Americans from the Houthis given this attack? I'm sure the Houthis know full well that the U.S. allowed the Israelis to do this.
It's not that they allowed or not allowed, but at the end of the day, the Houthis fire missiles at Israel, and the Israelis, at one point when the Americans were doing the bombing, the U.S. told Israel not to get involved and to scale down their attacks against Yemen. But after the truce was announced, not necessarily in full coordination between Trump and Netanyahu, it's obvious that the American leadership, President Trump, does not want to renew the Yemeni front at this point and to leave this job for the Israelis to finish on their own. And of course, Reham, we cannot separate this escalation in the fighting between Israel and Yemen from the deteriorating relationship between Iran and the United States on one hand and the European Union on the other hand, because of the talks over Iran's nuclear program. So that's why, some analysts would point out that this Yemeni escalation and insistence to fire missiles at Israel. At the time, other so-called arms of resistance, such as Hezbollah in Lebanon or groups in Syria, have stopped attacking Israel. That this escalation by the Yemenis and insistence to continue targeting Israel is partly in coordination with the Iranian side due to the fact that the negotiations with the United States over the nuclear issue are stalled and that there is no progress. On the contrary, there are even more and more sanctions being placed on the Iranians, and the Iranians as well. They are now facing tough sanctions by the European countries, Britain, Germany, France, who issued a statement recently warning that they will walk in that direction. So probably, I mean, again, let's not forget that this escalation between Israel and the Yemen can stop tomorrow if the Israelis stop their genocide war against Gaza and stop killing the Palestinians in such a manner that's making the entire world angry. And at the same time, that the Iranians do definitely have kind of strong influence on the Houthis in Yemen. And if the negotiations between Iran, the United States, and the Europeans maybe take a positive direction, perhaps they will have a role in convincing the Houthis not to escalate this confrontation with Israel.
Okay, Mr. Ismail, now the new acting prime minister, can he hold the movement together, given that the Houthi movement has basically received quite a large blow when it comes to top command in their government?
Firstly, we should understand that Al-Houthis group is a very doctrinized group. Therefore, it is not the Prime Minister's role that given the legitimacy. It isn't real. So the Prime Minister or the government in general has no great effect in the movement. It is just a face, an attempt of the group is to give it to itself as an indication that has the ability of having a government, but it has no effect. What effect is the doctrine side, as Abdul Malik al-Houthi, which means the Jihadist Council is formed of 7 persons, and then the family of what is called the Hashemite or the doctrinist of the Hashemite, and those are the ones is running the scene from behind. It is well known that the Rahawi, as named the Prime Minister, has the office director from the doctrine and the family group that manage the Prime Minister, and even they used to call him that he is not the office director but the Prime Minister. So certainly Miftah as an acting Prime Minister assigned to reform the government, and this government isn't recognized domestically and internationally, and he is just a part of the very narrowed and close circle of Abdul Malik, that he was running the government and as a deputy prime minister. So the issue of the cabinet or that being kidnapped by the Houthis, and even in Sanaa in general, there is a great Houthinization of all the government posts. So we are before a very clear landscape as in the system of the Valite Faqih and the Houthis equation that need to be imposed of the controlled territories by the Houthis that has only people and a leader leading by the name of God, and has the divine right to govern the Yemenis, and the rest are just worshippers. So any other designation to either the political council or even the other ministers are just the echo of the will of Abdel Malik al-Houthi,
Yeah,
the
your
Houthi
point there,
leader.
Mr. Ismail, makes it's clear. We understand now that the Houthi movement in general only sees this as a symbolic win for Israel. It's not really a win for them, and it hasn't destroyed the movement. But let's talk to Dr. Dawood about this now. Could this strike backfire on Israel by turning, this symbolic strike, I suppose, on Houthi leaders into martyrs, fueling broader regional outrage and the recruitment for the resistance axis? Would this fuel the tensions further?
Well, of course, Ilham, this attack against the cabinet, although I fully agree with Mr. Jamal on the insignificant role of this cabinet, the prime minister, and those kinds of names in the case of the Houthis, but it definitely will give the Houthi leadership, which is the religious leadership Mr. Jamal referred to, Mr. Abdel Malik al-Houthi, will give them justification to escalate further their attacks against the Israeli targets, and particularly the Ben Gurion airport and certain Israeli military targets if they can reach that. But again, the attempts by the Houthis definitely hurt the Israeli economy. It forces those missiles, they force the Israeli public to get into bunkers and hide for hours. But at the end of the day, over the past 2 years, these missiles have been more symbolic rather than militarily effective in pressuring Israel to stop its genocide war against the Palestinians in Gaza. So my answer is maybe in the coming few weeks or in the coming few days, we will see more missiles fired from Yemen towards Israel, but that will not necessarily change the equation that we've been seeing over the past 2 years, even if maybe perhaps the Yemenis will try to inflict more damage to the Houthis by using more advanced missiles or missiles with a bigger damaging capability. As you again mentioned in your report, that one reason Israel justified this attack against the Yemeni political leadership is that the Houthis last week, they used a missile that seemed to have that breaks up like a kind of a cluster missile. After it breaks up in the air, it breaks into smaller missiles, which made it more difficult to intercept that missile. So maybe the Houthis have some like weapon they didn't use before, some missile that has a destructive capability that they did not use before, and they would of course use the assassination of their top political leadership as a justification. But at the same time, they also have to prepare themselves for a similarly heavy retaliation from the Israeli side, considering the advanced capabilities the Israelis maintain in terms of Air Force and the support that they receive from the United States. And it's now a matter of intelligence war, whether the Israelis, after targeting the political leadership, they have more influential figures within the Houthi leadership that's going to be next, or we are going to be back to the what we have seen regularly over the past 2 years, targeting power stations, targeting airports, targeting ports such as Al-Qudaidah, which again would not change the situation. What would change, Riham, the situation and bring peace and calm to this region is to stop the Israeli war against the Palestinians in Gaza, and then we would not see attacks from the Houthis or threats from other parts towards the Israelis, because again, that's the main justification for any action so-called resistance groups are using to attack Israel.
Okay, Mr. Ismail, now with Israeli strikes forcing Netanyahu's own meetings underground, after the strike, the Israeli cabinet is fearful for their own safety as well. Do you think this has shifted the balance of fear, I suppose, in this sort of, backdrop of shadow war?
If I understand your question very well, if the Houthis government will minimize its activities with respect to what it's claimed as confronting Israel, I think the issue is related to the Iran's will. Iran today is using the Houthis as a part of the clashes against Israel and against the whole world. So the Houthis group aren't very much effective with respect to the Israeli massacres taking place in Gaza, and all what they are doing is just propaganda. And even with respect to their attacks in the Red Sea, according to the UN report issued 3 months before, that the Houthis group is just blackmailing the ships to go through the Red Sea.
Yes, so it's symbolic, I guess. Thank you so much. I apologize, I have to cut you off there because we're out of time. But thank you both for joining me. That was Dr. Khalid Dawood, the managing editor of Al-Ahram Weekly, and Abdullah Ismail, a journalist and political researcher. Thank you both for your insights, and thank you for joining me here. A strike that kills a leader, but not the cause. From Sanaa to Tel Aviv, the shadow war deepens. The region holds its breath. This is not the end, but a dangerous new beginning. This brings us to the end of today's episode of Think Tank. I'm Rehan Morsi. Thank you for watching.